The hallway was quiet and cold as always, but today Zara moved through it with extra energy. Her tail swaying side to side, and her eyes glowing with playful fire. She was not like the others, not afraid of the human who worked on the lower deck. Not afraid of the one they all called dangerous, quiet, strange. She found him interesting. She liked how he never looked at her, how he always kept calm no matter what, so she tested him again and again. She waited outside the cargo room until she heard his boots, then she stepped into his path with a grin, her arms crossed, her voice light as air. "Oh no, the great human is coming. Better move before he breaks into a sweat," she said, while tilting her head raised. Stopped but said nothing. He only looked at her once, just once, before walking round her like she was nothing more than smoke in the wind. That made her grin grow even more. She followed him inside the room, sat on one of the crates, and watched as he began to work. His strong arms lifted heavy gear like it was made of feathers. His skin was scarred in places and his movements smooth like a predator, but he still said nothing, not a single word. "You always work like a robot," she said, swinging her legs. "Maybe you are a machine under that skin, maybe you are hiding wires and metal under that quiet face." Still no answer. Ray's checked the supplies, marked them on his tablet, and ignored her like she was not even there. Zara's ears twitched, annoyed but also excited. No one ignored her, not even the elders back home on Kirel Prime, not even the male warriors who tried to challenge her in training. She was used to attention, used to being seen, used to winning. She jumped down and moved closer, close enough to feel his warmth. Her claws gently poked his arm just to see if he would react, just to see if the human would flinch. "Nothing, come on, say something," she whispered, eyes shining. "Are all humans this dull, or are you broken in?" Cydrus turned to face her finally, and for a brief second, she saw something in his eyes, not anger, not fear, but something quiet and deep, like a storm hiding under still water. "Stop it," he said. Just 2 words, but they froze her for a moment, not because they were loud, not because they were sharp, but because they were so calm, so certain. She smiled again, leaning closer. "Why should I, human? You think you can scare me with that voice? You think I will bow just because you speak like a commander?" Reyes looked at her, then turned away again. She stepped in front of him, blocked his path again, this time pressing a little more, her voice dropping to a soft challenge. "Maybe I want to see how far I can push you, maybe. I want to see what happens when the human finally breaks." He stepped to the side and kept walking, but this time she followed all the way to his room, at the far end of the deck, a place most crew never went to place. The Corel stayed away from like it was Cursor Jera, walked right in behind him before the door shut. She stood in the center of the room, arms on hips, tail flicking side to side like a flag. "So what now?" she said. "You going to call security? Tell them the scary alien girl won't leave you alone." Ray stood still for a moment, then turned to face her, slowly, very slowly, like he was tired of running, like he had decided something heavy. "Enough," he said in a voice that felt like metal and fire. "Enough of your games, enough of your poking, enough of your jokes." Zara blinked, surprised, not by his words but by the change in him. He was still calm, still quiet, but something about him felt different. His shoulders no longer relaxed, his steps no longer soft. He was standing like a soldier ready for war. She laughed a little, trying to cover the sudden chill in her chest. "Oh, the human speaks at last. What are you going to do now? Throw me out? I dare you." Reyes walked toward her, not fast, not slow, but steady, with eyes locked on her. Shira stepped back for the first time. Her smile flickered for just a moment. Her tail stopped moving, stopped inches from her, his breath warm on her face. "You want to know what happens when I break?" he said. "You really want to find out?" Zara swallowed, her voice stuck in her throat. For the first time since meeting him, something inside her said he was no longer the quiet worker, no longer the ignored human. Now he was something else. She forced a grin again, but it was weaker this time, and whispered, "Go on then, show me." And he did not speak again. He did not warn her. Instead, he moved faster than her eyes could track his hand, grabbed her wrist with gentle strength, and before she could pull away, his mouth was at her shoulder, and then she felt it, a bite, not painful, not cruel, but firm and deep. Zara gasped, eyes wide, breath caught in her chest. As her legs froze, her heart raced, her mind screamed, but her body trembled, not in fear but in something else, something strange, something ancient. She looked at him and whispered, "What did you just do?" Reyes looked back at her with calm eyes and said, "One word only. One begin asterisk." The door closed behind her, and the air in the room grew heavy like a storm waiting to break. The lights were dim, the walls cold, the silence louder than before. But Zara stood tall, with her arms crossed, her smirk still in place. She had followed the human here to prove a point, to make him react, to get under his skin, and now she was here with him alone. Reyes did not turn. He stood near the small table, where his tools lay neatly placed, every item in perfect order, every surface clean as if he spent hours arranging them. His shoulders were stiff, not moving, not breathing, like a statue made of wood. Zara took a step forward, her tail swayed, her voice light and teasing. You really think closing the door will scare me? Human, you think I will run just because you stand still like a frozen beast still? No answer. His hands remained at his sides, his eyes focused on the wall ahead, not on her, not even a glance. She laughed low and sweet, then walked to his side, close enough to feel the warmth from his skin. Her claw reached up, tapped his arm gently. No reaction again, like always, like nothing she did mattered. You really are no fun, she whispered, her tone dipping into challenge. Maybe I should poke harder, maybe that would wake the fire. Inura's finally moved, but only a little, his head tilted enough for her to see the line of his jaw, tight as steel. His voice came quiet, but sharp like glass. Under pressure, stop it. Zara's smile grew wide, her eyes bright. Now there you are, human. I knew you had a voice. Under all that silence, she circled him. Slowly, like a hunter testing a beast, not sure if it would strike or back away. He turned to face her at last, his eyes locked with hers, not angry, not wild, just steady, cold, strong. His voice came again, this time deeper. You don't know what you are playing with though, but I do, she said, leaning close, her breath brushing his skin. I'm playing with a creature who pretends to be tame but is full of fire inside you. Think this is a game, he said, voice calm, hands still at his sides, but jaw still clenched. You tease, you laugh, you push, but you don't understand what you are. Walking. Zara tilted her head, curious now. Is that a threat, human, or are you trying to warn? MIT is not a threat, he said, it is a truth. I am not like your people, I do not play with power, I control its aura. Blinked for a moment, caught off guard by the words, by the way he said them, with no fear, no ego, just fact, like telling the time, like saying the sun would rise. She stepped back a little, her smirk faltering only for a second. Then she laughed again, and said, maybe I want to see what happens when you lose control, maybe. I want to see. The fire rays took one step forward, and the room felt smaller, his presence larger, the air thicker. Her heart beat faster. Without reason, he said, you should not wish for storms. If you cannot stand in rain. Zara narrowed her eyes. What does that even mean? It means, he said, you pushed too far and I let you on. Then silence again, heavy silence. But now it was not the same. Something in the air had changed. Something between them had shifted, like the gravity had turned or the ship had moved, but only in this room. Zara felt it, but did not understand it. Her instincts told her to retreat, but her pride would not let her. She crossed her arms again, lifted her chin, and said, fine, show me then, human, show me what storm you think you'll carry. Race did not move for a second, then nodded once, and said, you asked for it, remember that. Then he stepped closer, fast, smooth, direct. His hand reached out and caught her wrist, not rough, not cruel, but firm like iron wrapped in silk. Her eyes widened, not from pain but from shock, from how quick he was, how silent, how focused. You like teasing, he said, but in my world, teasing has a to. Zara hissed a little, and tried to pull free, but his grip held her still, not crushing, not hurting, just unbreakable. Like a lock made of willpower. Let go, she growled, now her voice shaking with something she could not name. My will, he said, but first listen once more. I am not your toy. I am not your pet. I am human, and we are not safe when pushed too far. She stared at him, confused, angry, thrilled, her chest rising fast, her claws twitching, her heart racing. She had played with many warriors, but none ever made her feel this way. None made her question her own control. He let go then slowly, and stepped back, without a word, without a smile, without any sign of weakness. Stood frozen, unsure what to say, unsure what to feel, unsure why her skin still tingled where he had touched her. The door opened behind her, but she did not move. She looked at him one last time, and whispered softly, you are not like the others. Replied, neither are you. Zara did not sleep that night, not because she was afraid, but because her whole body felt strange. Her skin burned around the mark. The human had left, not from pain, but from heat, like something inside her had been lit on fire. Her mind kept going. Back to the moment, to the grip of his hand, the power in his eyes, the way his mouth pressed into her shoulder with no hesitation. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. She stood in the mirror later, and looked at the red mark. It was shaped like a half moon, deep enough to stay for days, light enough not to scar, but it meant something more, something far beyond teasing, something no human should know. Something sacred to the Kirillon. Her world, a bite like that was not violence, it was declaration. It was the ancient signal of dominance, and also of bond away. The first warriors of her race would challenge rivals, or claim mates. Not just in strength but in spirit, and now a human had done it to her. Without knowing, or maybe worse, maybe knowing. Exactly. She paced her room, unsure whether to hide the mark, or show it. Her fingers traced it again and again. Her tail flicked with nervous energy. She had always been the one in control. The one who played the game, the one who pushed buttons, and walked away before things got serious. But now something had shifted, and she was no longer sure who was in control. The next morning she walked through the ship like nothing happened, but everyone around her seemed to sense something was different. The air around her was heavier, the way she moved more tense. Some of the other Kurel warriors stared at her, then looked away. Quickly one of them even gave her a slight nod, as if she had won something none of them could explain. She finally saw Ray's again in the engine bay, where he worked alone as usual. He looked up once when she entered, then went back to adjusting the core lines, not saying a word, not even blinking. Zara stood in silence for a moment, unsure how to speak, unsure how to break the wall between them, then finally stepped forward and said, "It's too bit." Mireille nodded once but said nothing. "You don't understand what that means, do you?" she said more softly. "Do," he replied, still not looking at her. Zara's eyes narrowed. "You do? Then why would you be?" "'Cause you asked for it." His voice was calm, not angry, not proud, just honest. She stared at him, heart pounding, tail frozen. "That is not how our kind sees." Eth turned to face her finally, his eyes steady, no fear, no games, just truth. And said then, "How do they see it?" Zara stepped closer, her voice low. "The bite is a ritual. It is old, older than words, older than war. It is what our ancestors used to bind each other, to test each other, to mark what is theirs. It is used in combat, or in bonds sometimes." Both of us looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "And now you are Kajara." Could not answer. Her throat felt tight, her chest heavy. Yes. She was marked, but it felt different. It felt personal, not like a battle, but like something deeper, like a thread had been tied between them, and no one else could see. "I did not expect that from you," she said at last. "You kept testing me," he answered, and I answered back. She nodded slowly, and for the first time her smile was not teasing, not proud. It was unsure, maybe even curious. "You know the others will react," she said. "This is not a thing that stays hidden. Let them react." Ray said, "I did not bite for them." Zara tilted her head, studying him, the way he stood, the way his voice stayed calm, like fire behind stone, not wild but unshakable. He had always been different, but now she saw just how different he really was. She took a step back, her heart still racing. "You may have started something you cannot finish. Human may be," Ray said, "or maybe I finished something you never meant to start." Those words stayed with her all day, echoing in her chest like thunder in a cave. Her fingers touched the mark again, and it felt warmer, stronger, as if the bite had not ended something. But awakened it later that night, she found herself outside his door again, not sure. Why not sure what she wanted, just standing there, heart pounding in her ears, hand raised but not knocking. The door opened before she touched it, and there he was looking at her like he had been waiting, like he knew she would come, like the bond was already pulling them together. She said nothing, and neither did he, and for a long moment there was only silence between them. Thick like smoke, heavy like gravity. Then finally, she said one word, "Why?" And he answered, "Because you are not the only one who bites." Zara could still feel it. The heat from his grip, the weight of his words. The bite that had not broken her skin, but had changed something far deeper. She walked through the station halls like a shadow, not speaking, not teasing, not laughing, her usual fire gone, replaced by a quiet storm burning in her chest. The other Kurel noticed first. Their eyes followed her with sharp glances, their tails flicked, their voices low with questions. None dared speak out loud. Some of them sniffed the air when she passed, and then looked away, as if they had just smelled something ancient, something powerful, something forbidden. She avoided the human for 3 days, hiding in her room, was slipping through the halls when he was not near, but no matter how far she walked, her thoughts kept returning to that moment, to the calm in his voice, the steady fire in his eyes, and the deep pull that now lived under her skin like a string tied from her chest to his, always pulling, always there. The mark on her shoulder had faded, but its warmth had not. She touched it again and again, remembering the pressure of his teeth. Not cruel, not punishing, just real and sure and unshakable, like he had placed a flag in her soul. Her sleep became strange, her dreams full of fire and breath and eyes that looked through her. Her body moved without thought toward the lower decks, until she stood outside his room, heart pounding, hand raised, but unsure what she even wanted to say. The door opened before she touched it, and Ray stood there, same calm eyes, same steady frame, no surprise on his face. Like he knew she would come, like he had been waiting for her to stop running. "Feel strange," she said, voice quiet and raw, not used to being soft. "I feel like you lit something inside me, and now it won't stop burning." He stepped aside without the word, and she entered the room again, this time slower, this time not to tease, but to understand. They stood in silence for a long moment, no anger, no fight, just something thick in the air, something heavy and full of meaning. Do you feel it too? She asked at last. The pull that changed the bond. Yes. He said simply, no hesitation, no fear, just truth. Sat down slowly, her legs weak, not from fear but from the weight of what was happening, from the truth her people would never accept, from the feeling growing stronger. Each time she breathed, near him. This is not just a game anymore, she said, voice soft, like a whisper through smoke. You touched something old, something sacred, something we are not meant to share with outsiders then. Maybe I am not an outsider, he said. Maybe I was meant to find it. She stared at him, eyes wide, heart loud, chest tight. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even the elders, not even the warriors who trained her. She was always the wild one, the strong one, the one who needed no one, but now she needed something, and it scared Hertha. Others will come soon, she said. Some already smell it, some already know. They will challenge you, they will not accept this. Let them come, he said. I do not run from what I saw. She looked at him long and deep and saw it again, that storm under his stillness, that power he kept hidden like a blade wrapped in cloth, not for show, not for pride, just waiting for the right moment to strike. You are not like any male I have known, she said. You do not chase, you do not fight for show, you move only when it matters. And you are not like any female I have met, he said. You test, you push, you carry fire, like it's your birth. Roith Zara smiled, then not her usual grin, but something softer, something unsure, but warm like dawn after a long storm. She stood and walked to him, slow and steadied the space between them, disappearing with every step, her breath caught in her throat, her hands shaking. Though she did not understand why, she reached up and touched his chest, gently feeling the steady beat of his heart like thunder behind stone. She looked into his eyes and whispered, what happens now? He said, we wait for the challenge, and we answer it together. And in that moment she knew the bond was no longer just in the mark, no longer just in the fire, it was in the way their hearts now beat in rhythm, in the way their eyes spoke truths without words, in the way she no longer felt alone. She had teased him thinking him soft, she had tested him thinking he would break, but he had shown her a strength beyond muscle, beyond training, beyond even pride. And now, she was no longer the one in control, no longer the one leading the game. Now they were walking into something deeper, something ancient, something sacred together. The challenge came faster than she thought it would. Before the cycle ended, a Kirel warrior named Varn stepped into the dining hall and slammed his blade into the floor. His voice loud, his eyes full of fire, calling out the human in front of everyone. Before the crew, before the officers, before the eyes of all species, on the station. Zara's heart dropped when she heard the name, when she saw the tall frame of Varn standing proud with battle tattoos glowing across his chest. He was not just any warrior, he was firstborn of the Bloodclaw tribe. A house of fire and pride, a male trained in the old ways, a fighter who had broken bones with smiles and left scars in the name of honor. He looked straight at Reyes and said the words that could not be taken back. Your bite marks her, your scent claims her, your blood must prove it. The room fell silent, the humans froze, the Krill stepped back, everyone understood what had been spoken. It was no longer teasing, no longer whispers in the dark. This was ritual, this was combat, this was the way of the Krill. Reyes stood slowly from his table, his face calm, his voice low. I accept. Zara tried to step forward, but another warrior blocked her path. It is his trial now, they whispered. It is his arena was cold and lit only by the red glow of the challenge lights, the floor lined with old blood and sand, the walls high and hard, the crowd packed with silent eyes watching, waiting, judging. Zara stood at the edge, heart pounding, every beat louder than the last. She wanted to scream to stop this madness, but her pride would not let her, her laws would not let her, her blood would not let her. Reyes stepped into the arena wearing nothing but simple cloth, his hands empty, his feet bare, his breath Slovan stood across from him, holding a long curved blade, his body ready, his voice silent, his eyes full of rage. They circled each other like wolves in the snow. No sound but the breath between them, no sound but the crowd's rising tension. The challenge began with a roar from the horn, and Varn struck like lightning. Zara's breath caught as steel flashed through the air, but Reyes did not move like prey. He moved like water, smooth, quiet, impossible to catch. He ducked under the blade, stepped in close and struck with his fist, not wild, not messy, but focused and brutal. Varn staggered back, surprised, not hurt, but shaken. The crowd murmured in disbelief. A human had touched him, a human had drawn first blood. Zara gripped the rail tight, her claws digging into the metal, her heart screaming louder with each move, each dodge, each strike. Varn came again, this time faster, his blade a blur, his feet a storm, but Reyes moved like he had trained for this moment his whole life, like he had fought in wars no one could imagine, like he had danced with death before, and found it slow. The blade cut the cloth on his arm, but no blood came. He twisted, kicked, blocked, turned, and then punched again, this time into Varn's ribs, and a crack echoed through The arena like thunder under stone. The crowd rose shouting, the chorale howled, the humans gasped. Varn dropped to one knee, blood in his mouth, eyes wide but. He stood again, his pride greater than his pain. He roared and charged with everything left, and this time he did not miss the blade, struck Reyes across the side shallow, but deep enough to paint the sand red. Zara screamed without meaning, to her voice echoing across the arena. Her heart breaking as the blood hit the floor. Hit that floor. Reyes did not fall. He stood straighter, eyes locked on Varn, his breath steady, his wound ignored. He stepped forward, through the pain, through the noise, and grabbed Varn by the throat, and lifted him from the ground, with strength born of something beyond muscle. He did not speak, he only stared until Varn dropped the blade, and tapped the ground 3 times, the sign of surrender, the sign of truth, the sign of the ancient. Rite completed, the arena fell silent again, then exploded in sound, in roars, in screams, in disbelief. Rushed to the center, as Reyes dropped Varn and stepped back. His side still bleeding, his eyes still calm, she reached him and touched his face. Her hands shaking, her voice lost. He looked at her and smiled for the first time since they met, and said, softly, now, it is real. She nodded, tears burning behind her eyes. Not from sadness, but from pride, from fear, from awe, from something too big to name. The Kirel had seen the bond now, they had tasted the blood, now they had no choice but to accept. Zara knew in her heart, from this day forward, the human was no longer just a stranger, he was hers and she was his. Zara stood at the edge of the medical bay, her hands clenched, her tail still. Her heart heavier than it had ever been, not because the human was broken, but because he was not. He should have been groaning, or resting, or asking for help, but instead, he sat tall and quiet on the edge of the bed, his side bandaged, his eyes calm, as if he had not just fought one of the strongest Corel warriors alive, as if he had not just claimed her in front of their entire kind. She had always thought humans were soft on the inside, strong in body. Maybe but too careful, too thoughtful, too slow, for the kind of fire that burned in her blood. But now as she looked at Reyes, she saw something else, something more, something that made her want to tremble, and kneel and fight, all at the same time. He looked up when she walked in his eyes, meeting hers with no surprise, no alarm, no smugness, only quiet, waiting, like he knew she would come, like he had been waiting for her, not as prey, not as prize, but as something else, something rare. She crossed the room with slow steps, not knowing what to say, not sure if words even mattered anymore, because every time she looked at him, her chest grew tight, and her mind went quiet, and all she could feel was the pull between them, like a string woven through her skin, through her breath, through her soul. You should be resting, she said, trying to sound strong, but her voice cracked, and she hated that. She hated how he made her feel. Unsure of herself, he shrugged gently and replied, I rest when I sleep, and I only sleep when I need to heal, and I'm not broken, just bruised. Her lips parted to speak, but the words tangled behind her teeth. She sat beside him, without asking, without looking at him, afraid that, if she did, she might fall into whatever storm lived in those. Izu should not have fought for me, she said finally, her voice a whisper of ash, not because I am weak or need a protector, but because now they will say I cannot fight my own battles. Reyes turned his head slowly and said, you could have fought, but you would have had to bleed for something I already claimed, and I do not let others bleed for what is mine. Her breath caught as the word mine echoed through her like lightning. Through dry earth her claws flexed against her legs, her heart roaring inside her chest, not from anger but from something even more dangerous. And what am I then? She asked, not sure if she wanted to hear the answer, not sure if she could bear eyes, looked into her eyes and said, you are the one who changed me, and I do not change for just anything. The silence between them became warm, became real, became sacred, and then she turned fully to face him, her eyes glowing, her fingers reaching up to touch the scar now hidden beneath the bandage. The mark he had earned for Harry. Thought humans were logical, she said. I thought you made choices with your heads, not your instincts, not your hearts. He took her hand in his touch gentle but unshakable, and said, I do both, but only when something matters. Her throat tightened, her lips parted, her mind swimming in truths she had never faced before. I cannot pretend anymore, she said. I cannot act like this is just curiosity or ritual or heat. This is more than any of that. This is something ancient and terrible and beautified. Nodded, not speaking, only listening, only holding her hand tighter, like he had no intention of letting go. She leaned forward, her forehead touching his, her eyes closing, and whispered, I see you now, not just the soldier, not just the man who bit me. I see the fire, the stillness, the storm you hide from the world, and I want it. I want you, he said, voice low and rough, not as a trophy, not as a conquest, but as something real, as someone who stands beside me, not behind me, not beneath. The room faded around them, the lights dimmed, the hum of machines, soft, In the background and in that moment there was no war, no tribe, no blood feud, no past, just breath and skin, and truth. When she opened her eyes again, she saw her reflection in his gaze, and for the first time in her life she did not see the warrior, or the daughter of a proud bloodline. She saw something gentler. Something fierce in a different way, something like a mate. She reached up and placed her hand on his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady, and said, "When they ask me what we are, I will not lie, I will not hide." And when they ask me, Ray said, "I will say this is the bond I did not expect, but would never trade." The truth was now in her eyes, and his, and the bond was no longer just a story whispered in the dark. It was real, it was living, and it had teeth. The sky above the station turned violet, as the twin suns dipped below the rim of the stars. The air grew still. Across the decks and chambers of the Kurel warship, everything slowed, as if the universe itself was waiting, holding its breath, not for battle, not for death, but for something older, something sacred, something that had not happened in 1,000 cycles. Zara stood before the elders, her head high, her eyes steady, her voice silent but full of thunder, her body covered in ceremonial armor, sharp and dark, and gleaming with the light of her ancestors. But she did not wear it to fight. She wore it to honor the moment, to face what came next, not with fear but with fire. The crowd of Kurel warriors filled the chamber, their eyes wide, their tails stiff, some whispering, some glaring, some too stunned to speak. They had seen the human fight. They had seen the blood fall, they had seen the challenge answered. And now they would witness something none of them could deny, not even the high blood, not even those who hated the idea of mixing the lines of two worlds. Rays walked in slow calm, each step echoing like a drumbeat. His chest bare, his wound healed, his eyes locked on her, not blinking, not wavering, not afraid. The Kurel stepped back as he passed, not from weakness but from something deeper, from the force he carried in his presence, not just muscle, not just skill, but meaning, the kind that came from choice, the kind that made warriors stop and watch and wonder. He stood before her in silence, the space between them hot like breath before a kiss, like fire before the spark. She did not speak, and neither did he, because this part had no words, only action, only truth, only Bonchara turned slowly, pulling back her armor, exposing the skin of her neck where the old mark had faded, her breath shaking not from shame but from weight, from the power of what this meant, what it would change, what it could never undo. She tilted her head slightly, eyes on his lips, voice soft but steady. "Bite me again, but not to challenge, not to test, not to prove your strength this time. Do it to seal the bond, to make it final, to make it real." Ray stepped closer, his hands at her waist, his mouth inches from her skin, his breath warm, his eyes closing, not because he feared the moment, but because he wanted to feel all of it, with nothing in the way. No pride, no doubt, just instinct and truth, and choice. And then he bit her again. The pressure of his teeth sank into her neck, slow and deep, not cruel, not rushed, just full of meaning. Her claws dug into his arms, her knees bent as the heat rushed through her bones, and the bond locked in place. Like steel, like stars, like forever. A shockwave pulsed through the chamber, light bursting from their skin. Not fire, not pain, but pure energy. The mark on her neck glowing, the wound on his side burning with the same light, the same force, the same bond. The elders rose from their seats and bowed their heads. The warriors dropped to one knee. The younger ones watched with wide eyes and silent awe. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move, because they all felt it, because they all knew it, because nothing in the galaxy could explain what had just happened, but no one could deny it. Ithara pulled back slowly, her eyes still glowing, her breath still quick, her hands still holding him, like he was the only real thing left in the universe. She looked at him and said softly, "Now, it is done." Rays nodded, his voice low and rough. "Now it is forever." They turned together, facing the crowd as equals, not as conqueror and conquered, not as outsider and heir, but as bonded beings. Two flames from different stars now burning as one. The station would never forget this moment. The galaxy would whisper about it, the Kurel would fight it, or follow it, but no one would undo it later. When the chamber emptied, and the silence returned, and the stars moved on, they sat alone in his room. Her head on his chest, his hand on her back, not needing to speak, just listening to the rhythm of two hearts now bound by one beat. "You know, they will talk," she said, with a small smile. "Let them talk," he answered. "Let them howl, let them break. I have what matters." She looked up at him, her eyes soft, her smile real. "I was wrong about humans," she whispered. "You are not soft, you are sharp, where it counts, and strong where it matters. And you," he said, "are not just fire, you are the flame that chose me." And in the stillness of that night, in the warmth of their bond, in the truth of their silence, nothing else existed, nothing else mattered, just her and him, and the bite that bound them forever.